Who was the Axeman of New Orleans? A hired killer, spirit from another world, a jazz musician trying to get famous? In this video, I'll be trying to unmask the demonic figure who terrorized a city, and finding that instead of the handful of victims he is claimed to have killed, the true death toll could be much, much greater. With religious cults, voodoo priestesses, mob hitmen, and a jazz-loving murderer, it could be one of the strangest stories I've investigated yet. In the early morning of May the 23rd, 1918, Andrew and Jake Maggio make a gruesome discovery at the house they share with their brother Joseph, an Italian grocer and bar owner. Alerted by strange groaning noises, they enter the bedroom of Joseph and his wife Catherine to find a truly appalling scene. Seemingly, while they slept, the couple's throats have been slashed with a straight razor. Then both have been hacked repeatedly in the head with an axe. The bed, the walls, the floor, the entire room is covered with blood and brain matter. Catherine is already dead, her head nearly severed from her body. Joseph still clings to life just, but will be dead before the police arrive. In the bathtub, officers find the bloodied axe. It's one owned by the couple themselves. Outside is the razor, also from the house. Nothing has been stolen, and police are baffled. The killing of the Maggios marks the beginning of 18 months of terror for the population of New Orleans, and the attack bears all the hallmarks of what is to come. A shadowy figure who seems almost invisible, breaking into homes at the dead of night and killing the occupants in their beds, using weapons taken from the property itself and usually left at the scene. The method of entry is also consistent. The killer uses a chisel to remove a panel from the outside door of the house, letting them either climb through or reach in and open the lock. Most of the attacks will be on people of Italian heritage. Many will be grocers, like the next victims. On June the 27th, Louis Bessemer and his partner Annie Harriet Lowe are discovered around 7 a.m. in the apartment they share behind his shop. Both have been hacked with Bessemer's own axe, which is again found in the bathroom. They have suffered appalling head injuries, but are still alive and able to recount the incident. Both give descriptions of the attacker, but due to the injuries they've suffered, these are unreliable at best. Harriet Lowe dies some weeks later, after changing her story several times and finally accusing Louis Bessemer himself of carrying out the attacks. Though he was jailed as a result, the conviction is overturned within months. Perhaps because of Harriet's delirious accusations, the first two attacks haven't yet been linked. But that changes on August the 5th. 28-year-old Anna Schneider, over 8 months pregnant, is napping while her husband works late. Waking with a start, she finds a shadowy figure standing over her and remembers nothing more. It's not until after midnight that her husband returns to find her unconscious and covered in blood, her head split open. Though the weapon used seemed to have been a bedside lamp rather than an axe, there are enough similarities for police to join the dots with the previous two attacks. Incredibly, Anna survives and gives birth to a healthy baby 2 days later, but just 3 days after that, the Axeman strikes again. Joseph Romero is an old man living with his nieces. Hearing a struggle, they rush in to find their uncle barely conscious and with deep axe wounds to his head. The man who inflicted them is only just making his escape, and for the first time, police get a fairly clear but vague description. A dark-skinned, heavy-set man wearing a dark suit and slouched hat. Though Romero is rushed to hospital, he dies 2 days later from his injuries. Now, panic really grips the city. People begin to sleep with loaded shotguns by their beds. Families divide into watchers to guard each other as they sleep. The police are flooded with claimed sightings of the Axeman, and in one case, an Axewoman, or at least a man disguised as one. The police admit that one person may be responsible for all the attacks. Retired Detective John D'Antonio gives his professional opinion that the killer must be a real-life Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with a split personality. Perhaps because of all the publicity and the trigger-happy grocers, there are no more confirmed attacks that year, though some attempted attacks do bear all the signs of the Axeman. And there's no doubt about the atrocity committed on March the 10th, 1919. Charles Cortamiglia, his wife Rosie, and baby daughter Mary are assaulted as they sleep. Alerted by screams, neighbours find Charles slumped on the floor in a pool of blood. His hysterical wife, blood pouring from her head, stands clutching the limp body of Mary, who'd been asleep on her. The tiny child has died instantly from an axe blow to the back of the neck. It's the most sickening of all the attacks. But just a few days later, the Axeman decides to throw a party. Many serial killers have taunted the authorities with letters boasting of their deeds, but none have been quite like the letter received by the Times-Picayune newspaper. Hot as hell, March the 13th, 1919. Esteemed mortal of New Orleans, the Axeman. They have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I alone know whom they shall be. I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe, besmeared with the blood of he whom I have sent below to keep me company. As is usual with such letters, the writer continues with sneers about how the police will never catch him, but then things get truly strange. At 12:15 earthly time on next Tuesday night, I am going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I am going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well, then so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe. And whether it's through terror or just the excuse to party, New Orleans jazzes it out big style. On Tuesday, the 19th of March, the press report every dance hall, cafe and bar in New Orleans was packed to capacity, while jazz blares from nearly every home. And the Axeman must have approved, because there were no murders that night. The letter's authenticity was never proven, and some cynics claimed it was a publicity stunt to promote a newly written song called The Mysterious Axeman's Jazz. But it did plant the idea that the Axeman could have been a supernatural creature, or at least might have thought they were. As we'll see later, that's more likely than it sounds. Only 3 more attacks were to be attributed to the killer, and only one person actually died. On October the 27th, 1919, in a textbook killing, Mike Peppertone was found by his wife, Esther, in his blood-spattered bedroom, seconds after she saw a large axe-wielding man running out of the house. And as suddenly as they began, the attacks are said to have ceased. Only that wasn't true at all. Today, many accounts of the story claim those were all the killings and attacks carried out by the Axeman of New Orleans. But right from the start, the police had suspicions there was more to the case. At the scene of the Maggio murders, supposedly the first time the Axeman had struck, a message was found scrawled on a nearby wall in chalk. Maggio will sit up tonight, just like Mrs. Tony. Digging back through their files, police found the case of Tony and Joanna Sciambra, Italian immigrants who ran a grocery store. 7 years before the Maggios died, the Sciambras were attacked at night by an axeman who chiselled away the panel of the door. Mrs. Sciambra was commonly called Mrs. Tony by her customers, the reference left in chalk years later as the killings resumed. And it wasn't an isolated case. Police found that many attacks, mostly on people of Italian heritage, often grocers, had been reported in 1911 and 1912 in the city, nearly all using the same modus operandi. So, was it the same killer? Did he just not like Italians? Or grocers? The first wave of killings had been put down to Black Hand criminals, forerunners of the mafia, centred around blackmail, extortion and score settling among the Sicilian immigrant community. The name of Joseph Monfra is often mentioned, an enforcer, it's claimed, who carried out the 1911 murders but was then sent to prison until 1918, the year the murders restarted. Some writers went further, alleging that Monfra eventually married and was killed by Esther Pepitone, wife of the Axeman's final victim, Mike Pepitone, who was himself involved in criminal groups. But many other researchers claim all of that is urban legend, and it's certainly true that the second set of murder victims was more mixed. Though a grocer, Bessemer was Polish, and according to poor concussed Harriet, also a spy, an accusation that got him locked up again. Sarah Lauman, one of the victims who survived, was a 19-year-old single woman, neither Italian or a shopkeeper. Other theories have suggested the Axeman was a sex attacker, yet there is no evidence for that either. It's also possible some of the killings were connected to Black Hand and others were copycat slayings committed by others. But the truth could be much stranger still. Through the early years of the 20th century, Louisiana was teeming with religious sects where Christianity, voodoo spiritualism, and the occult were mixed into one. Many were harmless, some were definitely not. While the first set of axe killings were underway in New Orleans, further south around Lafayette and even into Texas, many more people were dying. Between 1909 and 1912, at least 12 families were butchered in horribly similar circumstances. Sometimes 5 or 6 people at a time were being found with terrible wounds, inflicted by an axe. Often passages from the Bible would be daubed on walls in the victim's blood. There were signs of strange rituals, with some body parts missing. In one case, 3 children were drained of blood, which was placed in buckets next to their bodies. After one killing, police followed a trail of bloody footprints to a nearby house where they found blood on the door handle. It was the home of Clementine Bernabet and her brother Zephyrin. Searchers revealed women's clothing covered with blood and brains. Barnabet told a horrifying story. She was a high priestess of the Church of Sacrifice. She believed that by killing people, sacrificing them, she would attain immortality. Voodoo charms made her immune to harm, and another gave her the gift of invisibility. With her father, brother, and others, from the age of 15, she claimed to have killed at least 35 people in towns that flanked the South Pacific Railroad line, the same line that led to New Orleans, 100 or so miles to the north. Raymond Barnabet was jailed in October 1911. A year later, Clementine too was jailed for life, but not before telling a reporter that other families were marked for death and would pay the sacrifice. And sure enough, the killings kept happening, even after the pair were imprisoned. So could it be possible that members of the Church of Sacrifice also moved up the railroad to New Orleans to carry out their work among new sinners? Remember the Axeman's letter? They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. The same sort of language used by Clementine Barnabet. One of the largest cults in New Orleans at the time was called the Council of God. They believed heaven was reserved for white people, while the blacks were condemned to the hell of poverty, labour and slavery, but could be released by killing the whites. The Axeman claimed he was from hell, so could it be a clue that he or they were part of the council, the Church of Sacrifice, or both? We'll probably never know the full truth, but one thing is sure, the case of the Axeman is much more complicated than many believe, and claimed far more lives too. Not just of Italian grocers, but people of all ages, races, occupations, in New Orleans and far beyond. Clementine Barnabette herself was subjected to a medical procedure in prison that the authorities said cured her. Though how you cure a murderous voodoo priestess isn't explained. She was released in 1923 and vanished. There is no further record of her at all. Perhaps she really was a demon from the hottest hell, because the killings still didn't stop. But that's a story for another video. Let me know who you think the Axeman was in the comments, and if there are mysteries you'd like me to investigate, let me know that too. Be sure to check out my playlist here, and thanks for watching.